like to thank again Professor Mears and Professor Luna and Professor Henning for that wonderful presentation, and Professor Hutchins for her expert moderating. We are, when you invite members of Congress, they have a day job, and Congressman Raskin has arrived. He is in the building, and I'm told he is walking down, and I see him right there, and so I will introduce him now. I am honored to do so, and let me tell you a little bit about Congressman Raskin before we invite him to speak. Congressman Jamie Raskin proudly represents Maryland's 8th Congressional District in the U.S. House of Representatives. The district includes parts of Montgomery, Carroll, and Frederick counties, and Congressman Raskin was sworn in to the 115th Congress on January 3rd of this year. He is the vice-ranking member of the House Judiciary Committee and serves on 2 judiciary subcommittees, the Subcommittee on the Constitution and Civil Justice, and the Subcommittee on Crime, Terrorism, Homeland Security, and Investigation. He also serves on the House Oversight and Government Reform Committee and the Committee on House Administration. He is the freshman representative on the House Democratic Steering and Policy Committee, the Congressional Progressive Caucus Vice Chair and liaison to new members, and is a senior whip for the House Democratic Caucus. He is also a co-sponsor of the National Criminal Justice Commission Act of 2017. Congressman Raskin is a graduate of Harvard College and Harvard Law School, and for more than 25 years, Congressman Raskin has been a professor of constitutional law at American University's Washington College of Law. He's authored several books, including the Washington Post bestseller, Overruling Democracy, the Supreme Court versus the American People, and also We the Students, Supreme Court cases for and about America's students, which has sold more than 50,000 copies. Prior to his time in Congress, Mr. Raskin was a 3-term state senator in Maryland, where he also served as Senate Majority Whip, and he quickly earned a reputation for building coalitions in Annapolis and delivered a series of landmark legislative accomplishments. He and his wife, Sarah Bloom Raskin, live in Tacoma Park with their dog Potter, and they also have 3 children, Tabitha, Tommy, and Hannah. And Congressman Raskin's kids and my kids went to school together, and so I saw firsthand how there were so many young people who were energized by his campaign and his commitment to issues such as criminal justice reform. And I first met Congressman Raskin when I was in law school, and he had written this brilliant piece dealing with representation of District of Columbia residents in Congress. And I had written my senior honor thesis in college on the DC statehood movement, so I was particularly interested in the piece. And despite my best efforts, it failed. And I don't know if you knew this, Congressman Raskin, only 1 vote short in the Articles Committee at the Harvard Law Review of being published. So back then, although we had email, we still resorted to the phone first. And I actually took a big step, and I called then Professor Raskin, and I told him how much I enjoyed his piece and how meaningful it was to me. And I'm very glad that I did, because it gave me an excuse to get to know such a passionate, accomplished lawyer, scholar, and now public servant. And it was a coup to get him here, and again, in the middle of a busy legislative day, but I think he may have felt obligated to accept our invitation, given that in his congressional district, he represents at least 1/3 of the GW Law faculty. I think it's fair to say. And I admire him greatly, and I am thrilled to have him here to deliver our keynote address. So please join me in welcoming my congressman, Congressman Jamie Raskin.
Well, thank you for that beautiful and stirring introduction, Roger. And I'm delighted to be with you and with all my friends here at GW and all the great students from the Law Review. I also see my beloved colleague Angela Davis here, and I don't know if there's some other people from AU who braved the traffic downtown to come to the conference. Looking through the program, I was delighted to learn that there was a keynote speech last night. There was a keynote speech this morning. I've got a keynote speech, so the pressure's off me, okay? I think everybody's a keynote speaker. That makes me feel better about what I've done. I don't have as much time to write law review articles as I used to. Ever since I got elected to Congress, I used to write books, now I write tweets. So I'm hoping maybe you guys will do the transcript thing, send me the transcript, and then I can fill in the footnotes with the help of my able legislative assistants on the Hill. I should say I'm actually still a law professor at AU. I'm still on the faculty. I'm on unpaid leave of absence. So if the voters change their minds about me, or the president dissolves the Congress or something, I've got a job to go back to, at least for another semester or so, I think. I'm delighted to observe this important 50th anniversary with you. For one thing, it turns out it's an important 50th anniversary for a number of things, including the 25th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, which was added in 1967. And I've got legislation about that too, organizing the long overdue Oversight Commission on Presidential Capacity, which I've introduced. But I digress. But I am part of a legislative effort to not just observe this 50th anniversary, but to create a National Criminal Justice Commission today. And this would be, modeled after the one that President Johnson had 50 years ago, but we certainly have as much to talk about as the Congress and the country did a half century ago about the criminal justice system. So I think the anniversary gives us an opportunity to reflect. Some things have gotten worse since then in terms of spreading incarceration and growing social disintegration in many communities. We have a whole bunch of crises that have taken place since 1967 that didn't exist back then, most recently the opioid epidemic, which is racking so many communities today. But there have also been a lot of positive developments that have taken place since 1967 that can help us to mobilize further change and progress in the criminal justice system. And so I think setting a commission up would give us the opportunity to look at what things have gotten worse and why, and also what things are getting better and how we can reproduce them and distribute them across the country. And here I'll speak not so much as a member of Congress, where there's very little being done on criminal justice right now, but as a former state senator in Maryland, where we were getting a lot of stuff done. And I think that that is the experience that is taking place across the country in a lot of states. So, for example, I was very proud to have introduced the legislation and have led the floor fight for the successful bill to abolish the death penalty in Maryland, which we did after having it for more than 4 centuries in the state. But in our case, one of the decisive arguments was innocent people who are sent to death row. We had in Maryland the very first death row prisoner who was exonerated with DNA evidence, Kirk Bloodsworth, whose case you may have heard of. He was convicted of the most grisly, gruesome rape, murder of a 9-year-old girl you could ever imagine. The first trial ended with a hung jury. They brought the charges again. He was convicted. He swore on a daily basis to his jailer that he hadn't done it, and learned quite by accident of DNA evidence. He wrote to his lawyer, who's now the chief judge of the D.C. Superior Court, Judge Morin, But he wrote to him and he begged him to get the DNA test. And the test at that point was very expensive. And Attorney Morin, much to his everlasting credit, took $5,000 out of his own pocket to pay for the test, and the results came back establishing with 99.9% certainty that Bloodsworth could not have been the killer. And they actually ended up with a positive match with another prisoner who was in jail at the same time, a floor below Bloodsworth. And so he was exonerated. So, when I got up, I simply said to my colleagues across the aisle that the death penalty is a great system for people who think that the government is perfect and infallible, which isn't usually what we heard from Republicans in Annapolis about the government. And those people who invited us to believe usually that government could never do anything right now had to take the position that government could never do anything wrong, with the most serious of stakes and consequences. And so we did end up abolishing the death penalty, and we're part of a trend of 5 or 6 states that have abolished the death penalty over the last decade. So the movement is very strongly in that direction, and as an actual deterrent, the evidence has accumulated that the death penalty really has little or no deterrent value, or may in fact even contribute to the coarsening of people's sensibilities about killing and about death. And in fact, in the states, the remaining few states that have the death penalty and still use it, it seems clear that the use of the death penalty at least corresponds to or correlates with very high homicide rates in states like Texas and Florida and Virginia. So that's something that should really be on the table as part of a commission. Should America join most of the civilized, modern democracies which have discarded the death penalty, or should we remain in the company of China and Syria and Iran and other authoritarian governments? I think that there's also been great progress on the question of voting rights for people who have served time in prison. The vast majority of jurisdictions have decided to restore voting rights to people who have served time in prison. This is one of the things I actually campaigned on, because Maryland used to have the Mississippi and Alabama rule, the Florida rule. You got out of prison, you had every other right restored to you except the right to vote. And it's pretty easy to show that this has nothing to do with deterrence and nothing to do with rehabilitation, but it's really a strategy of voter suppression. I remember when I got elected and took office back in 2007, and I went to see the late, great Maryland State Senator Gwendolyn Britt from Prince George's County, who had been a civil rights activist as an undergraduate at Howard. She'd participated as a leader in the movement to desegregate the Glen Echo amusement park in Maryland, and she'd been involved in a lot of different civil rights activism. And I went to her and I said, Gwen, I got elected on this. I would love to help on the whole question of restoring voting rights. And she said, great. She'd been working on it for more than a decade. And she said, I'll let you know. And she came back to me just like 3 or 4 weeks later, and I was still completely new to the state Senate. I had not yet spoken on the floor of the Senate, and that's a very nerve-wracking situation. It's like never having spoken in class before, and you're about to get called on by the professor, But she came and she said, Jamie, we got the former felon voting bill out of committee, and we're going to bring it to the floor today, and we'd love you to be the floor leader. And I said, wow, I'm honored and thrilled and delighted. And she said, well, don't be that honored. You're the only white senator willing to do it. I said, all right, well, I'll take it however I can take it. And the Republican minority leader gets up and said, the Democrats want to give voting rights back to murderers, rapists, armed robbers. It just, reads down the whole list of felonies. And Gwen, who sat in front of me, turned around and she said, okay, it's your turn. You can get up now. And but I had an argument for them, which I had developed in the course of knocking on 17,000 doors in my district in my campaign. And I said, the vast majority of people who are in prison are there for nonviolent offenses, unlike the people you're talking about who are never going to get out of prison. I said, take one of my constituents, for example, Jack Abramoff. Okay, now Jack, who lives in the beautiful Burnt Mill section of District 20, has just gone off to federal prison for 6 years for offenses against the character of our democracy, the integrity of government. If anybody should be disenfranchised for life, it's somebody whose offenses are against the government. And so then everybody got up and wanted to speak for the Jack Abramoff Voting Rights Act, and we were able to pass that. We re-enfranchised 88,000 people, and then the next year another state did it, and so on. So again, we're moving, I think it's down now to just 7 or 8 states, I'll confirm, but the vast majority of states have re-enfranchised former felons, and that's something that we could be part of the work of a commission that discusses what are the best practices in terms of thinking about criminal justice. We've seen also significantly an important cross-partisan, cross-political coalition forming of younger progressive Democrats and a new generation of more libertarian conservatives who are willing to confront the criminal justice system with a new critical perspective. And again, we saw that in Maryland, where we were able to abolish mandatory minimum sentences in drug cases on a very strong bipartisan basis. Not everybody supported it on either side, but a lot of the libertarian Republicans and the progressive Democrats did. We also were able to decriminalize marijuana with a very similar kind of coalition, and I see the seeds of that sort of coalition in Congress also developing. And I know that there are groups across the political spectrum, some define themselves as liberal, some define themselves as conservative, but who are very interested in the question of how to reduce the levels of incarceration, reduce the levels of criminalization, and make the system a fairer and more humane and effective one. And I would say that the final trend that is out there, which makes it important for us to do a commission, relates to what's happened in academia and in public consciousness about crime. And I think about, of course, the new Jim Crow and, Michelle Alexander's pivotal work on that. My colleague Angela Davis's work about prosecutorial misconduct and discretion. There's much greater academic, intellectual, and public consciousness about the flaws of our criminal justice system and what we're doing. And I think that we've got to be able to galvanize that public sensibility and channel it into a meaningful policy recommendation vehicle that could then become the basis for real bipartisan action in Congress and in states across the country. So a commission, I've seen commissions work. We had a commission on the death penalty in Maryland. We had a commission on mandatory minimum sentences. They force people to get beyond reflexive partisan or ideological positions, to bring in experts, to bring in people who actually work in the field, to hear from them, and then to have sufficiently long periods of time where the commissioners are together that they can build some trust and come up with ideas that would have cross-cutting appeal. Then the commissions have the ability, by setting forth their recommendations and their justifications, to articulate a public agenda that has a lot more strength than simply somebody putting in a bill. somewhere. So I like very much the idea of reviving a criminal justice commission, doing one today, bringing people in from all parts of the political spectrum, talking about the things that have gotten worse in the country and talking about the things that are getting better, and then what we can do to keep progress moving forward in the country. So those are the seeds of my law review article, which I cast upon the audience, and I'm happy to take any questions or thoughts from any of you. And thank you very much for having me. So, And the bill, by the way, for those interested, is H.R. 1886. That's the number. And I can't quite see if there are any hands or no. All right, good. There's one question there, yeah.
Congressman, I follow the bill that's in the House and in the Senate. The Senate has, I think, 16 Democrats creating the commission and 12 Republicans. But there is really a small number of Democrats and Republicans in the House bill. Is there a strategy behind that?
It sounds like there's more like a lack of strategy behind that. I think that I don't need to tell you these are busy and confusing days in Congress. And again, this problem, which should be very high up on the public agenda, given what it means in terms of the communities across the country and people's lives, it has very, very low visibility right now compared to other things that are being thrust to the public agenda. I mean, to take the question of gun violence, and I omitted that just because when you add the question of guns to something, then immediately it becomes partisan, and there's a large faction of people who don't want to have anything to do with it. So, but when we had the Vegas massacre with 59 people killed, executed, and more than 500 people injured, we were supposed to be taking up legislation to legalize silencers that day, which when they came to lobby me about it, I said, is that like a mafia agenda, or where is that coming from? Who wants silencers? They also wanted to allow people who have a concealed carry permit in one state to be able to conceal carry anywhere in the country, overriding the laws of all the other states. So that gives you a sense of where the debate was. They removed those from consideration that day out of respect. Although if it's good public policy, I don't see why there's anything disrespectful about it. I urged them to bring it up that day. If I said, if you're not going to withdraw it permanently, today is the day for us to talk about it. But anyway, even gun violence, which was front page national news, we've done no legislation on it. And what they ended up replacing the silencer bill with the next day was a bill to ban abortion after 20 weeks with no exceptions for fetal abnormality, rape, incest, and so on. So the legislative priorities of the country are pretty distorted right now. And so I would be fooling you if I told you that this is high up on the legislative agenda of the majority in Congress. I think there is real interest among.
But in the Senate, that's a high number.
Yes.
And probably come out of the Senate first, and hopefully someone like Speaker Ryan, which at least he's talked about, might support it.
Yeah. Well, one can hope that we would do it. That would be an issue like infrastructure, I think, which would have cross-cutting appeal that could bring us together. As I was saying, there are a lot of things that are unifying liberals and conservatives and Democrats and Republicans about criminal justice, and there are real changes in public understanding that have taken place, which should be incorporated in the work of a new commission. So I agree with you. But I agree strongly with that. All right. Yes.
Yeah. Some people worry on this commission idea that unlike the 50-year-old commission that was named by one president
No, I'm not confident of that. I mean, it's possible that everything is so polarized and divided that any effort you create, you know, as a committee just reproduces the general conditions of ideological conflict. But that's not been my experience with commissions in the past. Commissions generally involve people who are serious about it, who who undertake it with a certain kind of solemnity and intellectual integrity. But I don't know. I mean, it's quite possible what you say is true, but then we're no worse off than we were before. You just return to whatever the general, battle lines are before you did it. It's an attempt to try to move forward on a bunch of these things and to see what the areas for cross-fertilization are. I do think, again, based on my experience in the state legislature, that there's a lot more movement in the communities at the local level to get beyond just the old dogmas about criminal justice and the old demagoguery about crime.
Well, let me first, before we thank Congressman Raskin, ask his colleague who he mentioned, Professor Angela Davis, his colleague from the Washington College of Law at American University, to promise not to rat him out, because what I am about to ask him to do is to accept this GW Law School silk tie as a token of our appreciation and to actually wear it on the House floor one day. So please don't tell Dean Camille Nelson that, in fact, Congressman Raskin would wear a GW Law tie. But on behalf of GW Law School, the GW Law Review, and everyone at the symposium, I want to thank you for taking the time to share your thoughts with us. And please join me in giving the Congressman a round.
Thank you, Roger. Thank you so much. I love it. All right. I'll wear it with pride.